Hi, it's Jerry with I Love RV Life, and today we're talking about digital voltmeters. It just couldn't get more exciting than this. Well, hi, it's Jerry, and after last week, we had an overwhelming response of you who wanted to know more information about how to use a voltmeter, or sometimes they're called digital voltmeters for those without the old analog dials, or just simply a DVM. So I'm really excited to be able to share how to use a digital voltmeter specifically for RV living. To me, it is a basic tool to me, and I know that from some of the comments, several of you said, I have one, I don't know how to use it. And we're going to fix that today because there's so many things that you can do with a digital voltmeter. They come in all kinds of sizes and all price ranges. We are not going to be measuring, things that require very scientific or very close tolerances. So a real basic $25 to, let's say, $40 digital voltmeter should meet, I would say, all of your needs in RV life. I have found that to be true for us over the last 4 or 5 years, and they've worked very well. You can buy these big units. This one's very, very expensive. The only reason I have this, it was a Christmas gift from the kids. Thanks, kids. I appreciate it. But I really don't need one with all these features for the types of things we're doing. It does, heat, and you can test transistors and yada 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 yada. The thing goes on and on and on, and I just really don't need something that quite this sophisticated. I have one like this. This is what they call a clamp-on. It has the digital voltmeter functions that you would find in most of your most standard digital voltmeters, but it also has a clamp-on function that you can go across one of the leads of an AC feed. And within that AC feed, you can see how much amperage that you're drawing. I had a problem with our refrigerator and an inverter about 2 years ago, and this was essential to be able to get that inverter replaced in warranty. So, but we're not going to go through all the functions for this. I think this is a discussion for another day. This is a very inexpensive, really very accurate for the price range. Again, I want to say this is roughly in the $30 range. I'm going to put in our show notes, both within this YouTube channel, and let me just take just a second here before I go on. If you haven't been to ilovervlife.com, I have every blog that I've ever done. The first year that we traveled, there are just nothing but text blogs in there, but it shows our 2,500-mile trip that we took all the way out through Texas and Arkansas and Tennessee, and just had a blast. Saw a lot of sites. And then, what was it, a year and a half ago now, just slightly over a year and a half ago, we started doing our video blogs. But aside from that, you can go to ilovervlife.com and you can see every vlog I've ever done, and I have detailed show notes in each one of those. So if you're looking for a product that I have shared in one of these videos, you can find it. I think I've got the latest top 10 on the home page, and then if you go to the bottom right hand side of that page, you can get a full list of every one I've ever done, and you can see the products. And aside from that, everything that we share on our vlogs and on ilovervlife.com, Joan and I have used. We either are using it now or have used it in the past. And I created an accessory page. It does two things. One, for those of you who are out there traveling, especially if you're new to RVing, this is a great place that you can find products. I apologize. I know this is sounding like a commercial, but it's not my intent. I really want to share with you how you can find good things that you can use in your RV travels, things that Joan and I have used. Look, if they broke and they were a terrible product, I've always talked about this in the past, we run a positive website. We don't slam products. We show you what works. If we go to a travel, we show you where we enjoy, and if we don't like it, it don't end up on the blog. It's just that simple. We like a positive life, a happy life, and that's just how we choose to do that. Kind of goes with loving RV life, right? Okay. All right, so enough of that. But if you're interested in finding any of these products I'm going to be talking about, you can find them. Again, I want to say this is right in the $30 range, and this is what we're going to focus on. I'm going to give you a close-up on how this is used, and I'm going to show you various things around the camper and outside the camper of how you can use a digital voltmeter. So again, before I start getting into the details, let me just cover a couple things. First of all, I'm going to be showing you how to measure something called DC voltage. This is typically what you find from your batteries. This is 12-volt voltage. You can touch the two ends of it, and more than likely, I'm not telling you to go do this, but you can touch the two ends of a battery with your fingers and nothing will happen. I mean, I doubt you'll feel a sensation or anything else. Because it's 12 volts. It is high amperage. Things like wedding rings, metal watch bands, a necklace, if you go across the positive and the negative post, you will weld to it. Again, I think I mentioned in the last vlog, I was a telecom operations and engineer and business developer for over 30 years and worked inside large telecommunication centers where we had all kinds of different voltages. Large DC plants, large AC plants. I'll go into a little bit more of that, what those two things are in a few minutes. And we never wore jewelry. So anytime you're working around power of any form, whether it be AC or DC, I strongly recommend take off that jewelry or at least stay clear of it, especially if you've got watch bands, especially if you've got necklaces, metal necklaces that are dangling. That's just nothing more than a formula for a serious problem. A second thing I want to share with you is that, again, this is going to sound like a disclaimer, and maybe to some fact it is. When you're dealing specifically with AC voltages, they are dangerous. They can kill you. When I was in the Air Force, we had these signs. They would put it over places where you had a high energy content, and it was real simple. It had a skull and crossbones, and right above it, it would say, "Death on contact." So I don't want to be that extreme, but the fact remains that you can hurt yourself, especially if you have something like a pacemaker, or if you have a weak heart, you could possibly do something even more severe. So what I want to share with you now, and I want to stress it, anytime that you're working around an AC outlet or you're making a connection of your camper to that outside post, that service location to where you're going to be connecting, please be careful. And then if you're going to use something like a digital voltmeter to be able to test it and make sure everything is okay, do not touch the metal probes where you're going into the receptacles. That is a place where you can receive a severe shock, harm yourself, or possibly worse. Okay, so I want to stress that. Again, I'm not trying to scare you or put fear in you if you've never done something like this. If you respect it and you treat it in a manner that you should, then no harm will come to you. Secondly, if it's pouring down rain, don't go out and test currents or voltages at an AC source. You are what is referred to as a conductor. You are no different than that plug going in. That plug is going to get wet, you're going to be wet, your feet are going to be wet, and you are going to be a source of what is referred to as ground. And AC current could possibly flow through your body, harm you, or worse. So I want to stress that as well. Do not be standing in puddles of water doing this. Do not be doing this in the rain. For those of you who are seasoned RV travelers, that is just one of those things where you would never even think about doing something like that. But if you're new to travel, you may not realize how harmful that can be and how dangerous, incredibly dangerous it could be. So again, those are my cautions. I've said that. Now we can move on and talk about digital voltmeters. So from here, I'm going to make some connections to this. I'm going to do a close-up with the camera and show you the different functions. Let me make one more statement. I am not going to be giving electronic or electric theory today. That is something referred to as Ohm's law. Usually if you take a basic electronics course, that's usually a 1-week course. There's tons of videos, tons of websites where you can go out and find out what Ohm's law is. This is the formula for resistance, amperage, current, wattage, power, that type of thing. So I'm not going to be going through that. I'm really just going to be talking about the basic functions of how to use this digital voltmeter and how you can use it for troubleshooting basic problems that occur within your RV and things that you can say, oh, warning, I need to get some help, or, oh, now I know what's wrong and I can repair it. Okay, so let's go from there. So this is an EOTech digital voltmeter. It's or sometimes they're referred to as digital multimeters. It has a number of different functions. We're going to be going through some of the basics today. We're going to go through how to measure DC voltage, how to measure AC voltage, and how to measure resistance, specifically again for being able to see if you've got any related issues inside of your RV, or even for that matter maybe making a connection outside your RV. You're going to have something that looks like this. This is referred to as probes. This is where you make your connections to do measurements. This really serves no function without the probes. You're going to see here that this has 3 common connections. The ones that we're going to be using today is something referred to as common, and this is where all your AC, DC, and low amperage measurements occur. And I'm not going to be showing amperage today. I think that's something for another time. This one here, you're going to see a large A on it. I'm not sure if it shows in the video. This is for high amperage. Again, we're not going to be dealing with amperage. So we're going to take common. We're going to use common as black. This is also referred to in the DC world as the negative. And then we're going to take the red and we're going to put it in this location here where it's showing volts, ohms, microamps, milliamps, and it actually has hertz on it and some other things. This is referred to as your power side, or in DC voltage, it's going to be the plus side. When you're measuring things like resistance, or if you're measuring things like AC voltage, it really doesn't matter which one of these probes that you're going to be using. Your polarity only matters when you're looking at things like DC voltage from that standpoint. We have a knob here and a meter, and in this first location we see a V, and I'm going to get in as close as I can. I hope that this focuses for you. I apologize if it doesn't. But you'll see here we have a V and a straight line with some dashes under it. This V with the straight line is for DC measurements. You would use this to measure to see how, if you have let's say you had a light switch that goes bad, or a location that went bad to where you've got one of your DC light bulbs. This is where you would use to measure that. This would be if you were to measure across your battery post outside, or maybe even a 9-volt battery. I'll show you that to see if a 9-volt battery is good, or is a 1.5 AA battery is good. This is where you would use that. So you would turn this to that location and you see the meter reading, and the meter is picking up just some spurious information. Don't worry about that. It's just flickering back and forth. It's just really, this is a very inexpensive meter, and that will occur. The next location that we have here is a V, and it looks like a squiggly. It looks like an inverted S that you will see here. And that is for measuring your AC voltage. So this would be, let's say you have an outlet where your coffee pot is hooked up inside, and all of a sudden it quits working. You look at your circuit breaker and your circuit breaker hasn't popped. You look at and you plug this in, and all of a sudden you realize, oh my goodness, I have no voltage coming out of the wall. And this would be where you would start looking, okay, do I have a GFI tripped inside the camper? Or do I have some other type of electrical problem where I might need to give somebody a call to work on that? So this is where you would do this. This is also the setting that you will use to measure your voltage that I'll be showing you in just a few minutes for your connection outside of your camper to make sure that you've got good voltage, okay? And we'll talk about some of the theory there as well. Here you see the omega symbol. This is the omega symbol. In electronics, or in electricity, that is referred to as ohms, and that is resistance. What we will do here is something called a continuity test, and I'm just going to show you again the basics of what a continuity test would be. So we will look at that continuity test, and I'll use an example how to determine if a fuse has blown or not, and we'll use that as an example for a continuity test. I also used this when I had an open that occurred, something broke loose inside the camper for our satellite connection for coax, and I use this to test for that as well. So it has a lot of different functions when you come to that. Okay, so let's take the camera back just a little bit, and then I will show you how to be able to use this meter. Okay. So the next thing that we're going to do is I am going to show you how to use your multimeter for doing some basic testing, whether it is looking for resistance, say maybe I'm going to use an example, a blown fuse or a blown light bulb, non-LED. LEDs, sometimes you can read with these, sometimes you can't, just because they have some additional electronics in them and it may give you a false reading. But just a standard light bulb, I'll show you that, a standard fuse like this. But where I'm going to start first will be using this to measure a 9-volt battery. So it doesn't matter whether it's a 9-volt battery, the battery in your truck or vehicle, or whether the batteries from the house. Again, you would typically not use this to measure those batteries, but again, let's say you go to crank up your truck and it's slow to crank. You could put this across your batteries and all of a sudden, instead of seeing something like 12.7 volts or 12.5 volts coming out of your battery with no charge on it, and all of a sudden you see 11 volts or 10 volts, you know, oh no, my truck battery or my Toad or my Class C or whatever else, my start batteries, they have gone bad and I need to replace it. Great test for something like this. This is the battery out of our smoke detectors and carbon dioxide detectors, and I want to check and make sure that this is a good battery. It's fall. You know, what do they say? Fall forward, spring back, and this is also a great time to be able to replace your batteries inside your smoke detectors. And there's no need to put a battery in your smoke detector if it's bad. So I want to make sure that this one is good. The first thing that I'm going to do, again, is I'm going to put this on the voltage with the straight line, which is DC voltage. The reason I know this is I looked inside the manual, and that's exactly what it said it was. You'll see some spurious readings. Again, this is not a very sensitive meter, and it might give you some false readings at this time of just flickering around. It's not something that should be concerned about. All right, so red is plus, black is negative, and I am going to take, I know this, here is the plus on the battery. Sorry about that, the plus on the battery. So again, this is low voltage, it's not going to hurt me. And I can put this on here and I can see I have a reading of 9.58 volts. This is a 9-volt battery. That tells me that this is a good battery. This is a better way to test it other than sticking it to your tongue. Yes, I know that that will let you know if the battery has some voltage in it or not, but it's not very accurate. But this, by golly, tells me exactly what we should have in a battery. If you get your jollies off sticking these to your tongue, then do that first, and then you can always test it with a voltmeter. I don't want to take your fun away from you by using a digital voltmeter. So there's one test. All right, the next test that I'm going to show you, I'm going to skip AC voltage for just a moment, and I'm going to go up to the omega symbol. Again, this is ohms, this is resistance. So what this will tell me is if I have something called continuity or a path for current to flow through a circuit. So this bulb is part of a circuit. This is one end of the circuit. This is where the positive goes into it, and this is where it goes back to the negative side of the battery, and it has a filament. Well, if you were to look at this and go, well, I can look at it and I see the filament's intact. You know, I can do a visual. There's the filament, but for some reason it's not working. You could have, these have very fine wires down inside. Something could have happened. One could have been broken or not made a positive connection at the factory. So you put this in your lamp inside the camper and it still doesn't work. Well, maybe the bulb's bad. So here's a great way to be able to see. So I have put this from off to ohms to the omega. I'm seeing low. Low means I have no current, no resistance for current to travel. Okay, I know I'm getting a little technical here, but stick with me. And it doesn't matter which probe you use, you're going to get the exact same reading. There's no real positive or negative that we're going to be concerned about in this type of a reading. There's also, I don't have to worry about shock, it's just the power that's coming out of this. And actually you'll notice as I put my hands on this, it's actually measuring the resistance through my body, which is kind of interesting when you think about it. So what I want to be able to see if this is a good bulb, I'm going to take this and put my thumb on it right here and hold it in place. And then I am going to take the other end of the probe and put it right on the very top of this light bulb. And now notice what happens when I do this. I am going to go to low to all zeros. What that tells me, or even it's just something into the point range. This tells me this is a good bulb. If this was reading a high resistance, say something like 100 or 400 or 500, I know that I would have some kind of a problem inside this bulb. More than likely, if I had something like that and plugged it in, this bulb would probably pop. Something's wrong with it on the inside. But here I can see this is basically a straight through path. I'm just reading the filament inside this bulb, and I see that this is a good bulb. So that's a great way to be able to test something like that. Here's something else. Sometimes these little fuses, they will pop, but you can't quite tell. It's just a fine little fracture in the filament. Most of the times when these things pop, they blow inside this window, and if it's severe enough, you can see that that filament, the fuse that's on the inside here, completely is destroyed, and you can look at it and see that happens. But there's other times when this thing is such a fine little crack, you can't read it, and you go, well, is this a good fuse or a bad fuse? Again, I still have it in my ohms reading. I'm still reading low here, and I can take my connector and put on one side, and I'm not going to touch it with the skin on the other side, and I can test the post here, and I'm getting basically a 0 resistance. It's 0.8. I mean, that's nothing. I'm seeing that I absolutely have no resistance within this fuse, and if I was to, for me, if I was going to use this fuse, I would say that this is a good fuse. So that's off and that's on. So that's a great way to be able to use your digital voltmeter to see if your fuses are working or good or bad, okay? Now this is an example of a standard wall receptacle that you will find inside of most campers. This is a AC wall receptacle. This is where you would plug in, this is where we plug in our coffee pot and our toaster, as an example on the far side of the kitchen. Again, we're going to take our voltmeter and we're going to turn it now to the voltage, the V with a squiggly line. This is the setting for AC, and it's going to be very, very hard for you to be able to see this inside the meter. I'll try to get a close-up. This one actually takes some of the guesswork out, and right here in the far corner, it's very, very small. It actually shows AC, so that way I know I'm not making a mistake. And many of these voltmeters have some protection circuitry in it, so if by some chance you accidentally placed it on DC and tried to measure this, usually it will shut itself down or it will not read it and it will not cause any harm. They also have some small fuses on the inside of them. They'll pop, like if you were to try to do this on the ohms for some of your cheaper ones. These have some protection circuitry in them to keep you from doing that. So that's at least a good thing from that standpoint. Okay, so here I can take my voltmeter. Again, I am not going to touch any metal that is going to be stuck inside these little slots that exist within the plug. This will cause shock. Again, and it can harm you or worse. So I want to stress that it doesn't matter which one of these probes you use. There's no real AC or DC for this test that we're doing. And I want to see if this plug is good or bad. Let's say that I plug my coffee pot in. The coffee pot will not work. It will not come on. Is my coffee pot bad? Or has this blown a circuit breaker? Or do I have some other electrical problem? So I can take this probe and stick it in just like I'm putting it inside of a plug, right? And I'm going to put one in on both sides, and I can now look at my meter, and my meter is reading 126 volts or something like that. Okay, 126, 125. So that's typically an optimal range. So I'll stop here for just a second and talk about what you would see within an AC voltage range. Typically, your safe operating ranges are right around 105 volts to about 132 volts. But oh my goodness, if I was to see 132 volts on a circuit, I would start getting concerned. If I see 105 volts, I would start getting concerned. Let me share why. You're at the top range and the bottom range of being able to see voltage to where your appliances, your air conditioners, all these things will operate. So if you see 105, that air conditioner may operate, but every time it comes on, it's going to cause a surge. The voltage is going to drop and it's going to go down. What is that going to do? It's going to eventually burn your compressor out. It's going to burn your compressor out inside your refrigerator. It's going to do great harm. If you're at, say, 134 volts, it's not going to take very, very much to be able to cause great harm to your air conditioner as well. And that's why I use this. This is a surge guard. This is a model 34750. I have had this thing for several years. Bottom line, it has saved my kimchi. We have had 2 instances, one where we pulled into a campground down in Panama City one time, and it was hotter than blue blazes that day, and everything was working well. Both air conditioners were working. Everything was super fantastic. And then boom, all of a sudden one of the air conditioners quit, and then next thing I know, just a microsecond later, all the power went off inside the camper, and I thought, uh-oh, we blew a fuse. Let me go out and check. And I'm going to show you how I use my digital voltmeter to be able to test that in just a few minutes. But what I found was I had indicators on this that was saying, hey, we have got a fault. And what happened was the voltage on one leg went away, and in the process of doing that, boom, the surge guard automatically turned the power off to the camper and saved every bit of my electronics. Oh my goodness, this is in the mid $300 range. It probably saved me thousands of dollars. Look, air conditioner is going to cost you $800 and another $400, $500 to get it installed. I've got 2 of those. I've got a $500 refrigerator, whatever the microwave costs. You see where I'm getting at. TVs, on and on and on. I've got, you know, a very expensive computer and computer monitors in here, on and on and on and on. Thousands and thousands of dollars can literally cause you problems without something like this, okay? This, I'm telling you, I talk about essential items when you travel. And I'll put up here in the top, if you haven't seen it, I've got, you know, essential adapters, and I talk about this in greater detail. And I'm actually going to show you how this operates. I don't think I've ever done that before. The other thing it does is if you were to have a big lightning blast out into the campground, this has got some protection inside of it that will pop and keep it from coming inside of your camper and blowing everything up. Everybody's got that story of someone in the campground where a lightning blast came in and just blew up all their electronics. This will protect you from that, or at least it has for me, and we've had some dillies. I want to share that with you too. And it's worked every time. If it blows, you send it to the factory. They replace something called MOSFETs in it. It's got a reading inside of it. It's got several other things that will really protect your camper. And again, I'll show you the operations of this in just a few minutes. A wonderful, wonderful device. Just absolutely love it. Getting back to operating voltages, one of the things, you know, I can give you some ranges 105 to 134. That's just Jerry's rules, but that's about where things should operate. And the reason I use that, I've looked at the manuals for my TV, I've looked at the manuals for the air conditioners, for the refrigerator, and they tell me that is about the approximate range they want to be able to operate in. Typically, you want to operate somewhere at about 110 to 112 to maybe up into the high 120s. And if you're within that range, you're going to have a safe camper to be able to operate your voltages and all your electronics that are in there at any given time. And the nice thing about the surge protector, it has a reading on there, and I'm using 50 amp connection, so I have an L1 leg, I have 50 amps on one side and 50 amps on another side. I've actually got it has 2 power feeds coming inside the camper, and it will give me the reading of the voltage on both legs. It will give me the reading on the amperage on both legs, so I'll know how much I'm pulling through. It's great. One more quick story. We were in Texas, and I was having problems there, and every time the air conditioner would come on, boom, the thing would pop. And I went out there and looked at it, and every time it came on, I could see the amperage go up on one of the legs, and boom, it would go to 0. And the plug was bad. Something had happened, lightning, water, who knows, something had made the plug go bad. I went and shared it with the campground folks. They came in and put me a new plug, boom, boom. Joan and I had a great 2 weeks in Texas, so it works out really well. All right, so those are your operating voltages. Well, I know I said today's video was going to be on using digital voltmeters. I've already showed you the surge protector, and I know that's a little deviation from what I shared, but I think it's still a critical component when you're looking at power to your RV, and it does have a digital voltmeter to some fact built into it. And then this is another handy device. Oh my goodness, I could not believe how cool this little device was and how I use it. This is called a Kilowatt Meter. I forget who the manufacturer is of this. I'll put this again into the show notes and on the ilovervlife.com page. Wow, this is a great tool. Let me share with you how this is used. So let's say that Joan and I are going to be planning on a trip as we're getting ready to head out west here in just a couple months and do you ready for this, a 5,000-mile trip. Woohoo! This one's going to be fun. But anyway, we're going to be doing that. One of the things I wanted to do is be able to estimate what my voltage and battery margin would be while we were traveling. And this really made my calculations incredibly simple, and I'm going to show you how it's used here in just a second. So here's what we determined. I've got 4 golf cart batteries here. I have no solar, so I can only last roughly, just running the refrigerator in the peak of summer, I can run my refrigerator for about 72 hours until I get down to about 12 volts on my battery. Why 12 volts on the battery? You go below 12 volts on your battery, you're going to start doing damages to your battery, so you don't want to ever do that. Some people say 12.05, but somewhere within that range, 12 to 12.05, okay? So this will tell me how much amperage draw will be pulled from the devices that I want to be using. So let's say that we're going to be going out, again, out west, and we're going to have a couple Walmart stops along the way, and I'm not going to have an opportunity to plug in. I don't want to crank the generator up and run it in Walmart or at a truck stop, although nobody's going to notice it in a truck stop. I can take this kilowatt meter and I can test the devices that I'm going to be running. So I can test my refrigerator and see how much wattage that it's going to be running. And this thing, you can set it up to be able to look at it at the moment, or you can plug it in and see what it takes, say, over an 8-hour period or a 16-hour period. It's awesome. And you can look and see how much amperage that it drew over that period of time. Let's say you want to run a regular fan, an AC fan over the night, and you're going to run that off your inverter as well. I can plug this in and see what my amperage draw is over that fan, do it times 1.5, and it tells me how much amperage that I'm going to be pulling out of that inverter, and I just use that as an example. Okay, so again, I know I'm getting into a lot of technical things, but what this does is it takes all the calculations away. I don't have to do any of the Ohm's law math. If you've already gone out to a website to determine what is Ohm's law, this just tells me how many watts I'm using. It tells me how many, what the voltage is, and it will tell me how many amps I'm drawing. It'll also tell me the hertz. It will tell me, hey, do I have a true 60 cycles? That's amperage. That's AC again. But have I got some weird things going on with the power that's coming out of my inverter that's not causing things to operate properly? Let's say it's running at 55 hertz or at 67 hertz, and I can't get certain devices to be able to work properly. That tells me I've got a crummy, cheap, inverter out there, and I need to kind of step that game up to make it work better. So let me show you how this kilowatt meter works. I think you're going to be impressed with it. I'm going to take the kilowatt meter and I'm just going to plug it into my AC outlet, and immediately, based on the button that I have here pushed, I've got it pressed for voltage, and you see that I've got a 124.4 volts. Should be no amperage being used right now, no watts being used right now, and you see I've got a good 59.9, 60 cycles coming in. That is all good stuff. That's exactly what we want to see happening outside of one of these meters. So again, I've measured my refrigerator, and I know that it's pulling 0.8 amps during the normal operation, so that's really good. So I have a little Lesco fan here that we're going to be using while we're doing our travel, so we can have a little airflow when we pull over in the evening. I'm going to start off in our lowest setting, and I can look here and see that it is drawing very minimal amount of amperage, 3.5 amps on of its lowest setting. And then I can look and see how many watts it's pulling. It's pulling roughly about, what is that, 37 watts. That's gives me a good bit of information, but at the same time I can go back to amperage. That's really what I want to be able to look at and see how much I'm going to be pulling outside of my batteries. Let's say I've got 200 amp hours. You know, I can look at this and say I can run it for roughly 3 hours and burn an amp. So, you know, out of my 200 amps of capacity that I have. So that's very, very important for my calculation. And then I can step it up to the next speed and see that now it's pulling, on the second speed, it really doesn't push that much more power. It's about a 3.4. So for a minimal amount of of amperage in my budget. It's not taking a whole lot of power to be able to do that on the next setting. And then I'll put it on the highest fan setting. You can hear it running in the background, and it's jumping up to 4.0, so 0.4 amps. What a great little tool to be able to look and see exactly what we're using here. This is roughly about approximately, 50 watts here, and then again I can look and see what the hertz are running outside of the facility. So it's working absolutely great. What a tremendous tool. And again, this, if you're fearful of being able to use probes and things, this gives you another type of a device that you can use to check your voltage. It's very simple. For AC only, this does not work for DC. But I think more above that, you can use this for your amperage reading to determine how much an AC appliance pulls, and you can look to see how much capacity you're pulling outside of your battery. I know this is a lot, but wow, what a great tool. All right, well, we've been through a lot. Wow, don't give up on me yet. I know this has been a long video, but I want to go through one more test of what you can use a digital voltmeter, and that is outside the camper when you first get to the campground. I've already given you all the warnings. I'm not going to go through that again. Just beware. But we've used it inside the camper and found it to be a very valuable tool to be able to troubleshoot light bulbs and 9-volt batteries and fuse connections. I showed you the kilowatt meter of how you can use that to be able to look at voltage as well on the AC side. As well as use it for things like determining what your wattage capacity or amperage capacity would be for pull outside of your batteries if you're running through an inverter. So again, another very valuable tool. Let me say this about inverter and then we'll go outside. If you are using an inverter, look at the efficiency rating of your inverter. Okay, they can vary. Cheap ones, very cheap ones, you know where you buy those at. I won't go into those, but very cheap. You find something for $49, $50 for a 1,000-watt inverter. There's somewhere some corners were cut to be able to get that thing so cheap. And I can assure you it's not going to be, it's going to be something called a modified sine wave. It's not going to be clean sine wave. You're not going to be able to run things like computers and things like that. May not even be able to run TVs off of it. Maybe. But you can look at your efficiency rating, and your efficiency rating of your inverters can be anywhere from about a 1.1 to even higher, to the cheap ones 1.8, 1.9, even 2.0. My goodness, if you see something like that, run. Don't even buy that. So what does that mean? So let's make the math just very simple so I can do it in my head. Let's say I plugged something in and saw that I was pulling 100 watts AC. I could look at my inverter, and if my inverter was rated at a 1.1 efficiency, that means it's going to take 1.1 watts to be able to make my device work using DC. So instead of it being 100 watts of power that I'm going to be using, 100 times 1.1 efficiency factor, it's 110 watts of DC that I'm going to be pulling out of there. You can do, and so you can do the same thing if it was 10 amps. My goodness, you're not going to pull 10 amps on something. Let's say 1 amp. Let's do the math and just make it simple. If it's 1 amp and the efficiency is 1.1, it would be roughly, approximately about 1.1 to 1.2, somewhere thereabout, to be able to use that as well. So again, look at your efficiency factor, then you can determine how much power you're pulling out of your batteries through your inverter to be able to run your AC device, and that kilowatt meter is absolutely essential. Wow, I use that a lot, but it is essential to help you be able to do that calculation quickly and simply and accurately to know what you're going to be using on the outside. Okay, let's head out. We're at home, so I'm going to be taking you inside my garage to where we have a AC panel and a 50 amp connection, to where we keep the camper plugged in to do things like, get the refrigerator ready before we head out the door, keep the batteries topped off before we travel, and all those types of things. And I have a 50 amp connection inside the camper, so I'm going to show you exactly how that connection works in there. Plus I won't be in the hot sun. Benefit. All right, let's go outside and I'll show you that. I'm in the garage. This is our AC panel that we have coming inside that I had installed. This is a 60 amp connection here that runs the camper and then the lights inside the garage that I use here on the outside. I've got 50 amp breakers located here that I can turn off and on for the power. Right now I currently have it off. That's something else I cannot stress enough, is that when you come into the campground, Oh my goodness, so many times I flip the panel open and see that the power is on to the connection, and never connect your camper to a plug if the circuit breakers are on. Ooh, I don't even want to think about it. Can cause some problems. So I'm going to measure the legs that I have here. I'm going to zoom in and try to do this to where the meter will show. But in a 50 amp connection, we have several things that we have to think about. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the power on. I've turned the circuit breaker on. You heard that click. And I'm going to take my negative probe and put here where I can see it. And I'm going to take this and put it in the one side here. Notice I'm not taking my hands off the plastic, and I'm reading roughly about 122 volts and some change. So I know that this is a good connection, a good leg that I can trust. And I'm going to do the same thing over here and test the other side. And I'm reading 122 volts over here as well, 122. Notice I never take my hands off the plastic parts. I'm never touching the metal. The next thing that I want to be able to do is test my ground, and I'm going to test it to my case that's up here and make sure that I don't have any voltage. And if I see voltage coming off of this, then I know that I've got what they refer to as a hot neutral. There's a lot of discussions right now referring to hot skin on your RV. And if you see something like this and you get a reading off of that, you can also go down here to your neutral and touch it up here to the ground, and you should not be reading anything as well. That would also say these were reversed. And again, that is incredibly dangerous. Yeah, all your electronics will come on inside of the camper, but what will happen is the outside of your camper will have voltage on it. Bottom line, it can kill you. There's just no way to be able to put it. So this is a great way to be able to come in here and test this, test it to ground, see if you got any voltages. And if you have voltage on here, you read 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 volts, it doesn't matter. If you see voltage on the side of that, run to your camp host and say, I've got a problem with my plug, I got hot skin. And if they don't come running and they don't want to remedy it, my suggestion is go to another campground. I mean, that's just the bottom line. It's not safe. Let's look at something else that I think you'll find very interesting here. Okay, I'm going to turn this back off, and I want to show you how to be able to use your surge guard, and then I'll actually show you, I think I can zoom in close enough that you can see the LEDs on this. I'll do my best to get the camera up close enough. So again, I've got my power off, and I'm going to take this. It's just simple enough. It's got a little handle on it so you don't have to expose yourself to the metal, and I'm going to plug it in here. Then I'm going to take my 50 amp connector that I have here at the bottom, and I'm going to plug it into the base here. And then I'm going to turn this back on. Okay, so let's turn the power back on, and I'll let you see what's going to happen here. So the first thing you see is a caution when flashing. And this is going to give you two indications. You're going to always see this when the unit first comes up for the first time, because it is not operational. The second thing that I want to share with you that is a tremendous benefit of having this device. Notice you see a delay going on. This is roughly about a 2-minute delay. Why is that important? Well, if you're having the power go off and on at your camper and it's the summer and your air conditioning is running, if you lose power, this will shut off. And when the power comes back on, whether it's 5 seconds later or 5 hours later, the thing that you got to really worry about is those what I call intermediate power outages, off and on, off and on, off and on during a lightning storm. This will shut off for 2 minutes before it will put power back on into your camper. Why is that important? Well, it keeps you from burning up the compressor in your air conditioner. Yay! This is all built in. So we're going to let this continue. I'm going to kind of speed this up here real quick, and we'll let it get to the point to where the delay cuts off, and then I'll show you the remainder of what you can actually get outside of this unit. The nice thing about it is there's no buttons to push. Everything just flashes on and flashes off and tells you whether you've got good power or bad power going into your camper. So did you see that? We heard, I don't know if the camera picked it up or not, but it went bang. That was the relay firing on the inside. And what we're seeing now is the caution light when flashing, that has gone off. We now see a green light here at the top, which says that we have power on. And more importantly, we've got our little LCD screen here that's telling us exactly what is going on inside of the RV. So you see the two legs, 124, 123 volts. There's L2 at 124. You see how much amperage is being pulled on both legs. I know this is going very, very fast, but it tells me that I have a healthy AC circuit for my 50 amps. Look, this device works for 30 amps as well. It's a different model. I'll put that down in the show notes as well, but it gives you the same information. You're not going to have two legs of voltage. You're going to only have one, but you still get the same benefits of the pauses, the current protection, and telling you how much voltage that you have, and also that voltage shut off if you get outside of your ranges. I gotta tell you, this is just an amazing product. I cannot imagine not having this device on my camper, protecting all of my electronics and my appliances that I have inside of it. It's just absolutely fantastic. Wow, I know this was a long video. If you stuck with me up to this point in time, I guess I should send you a certificate that says I survived Jerry's digital voltmeter YouTube class. Well, thank you if you did stick with me so long. And if you did, you're a hardcore RV or camper. You want to know how to be able to make sure that you can maintain even the basics of your camper by using one of these very simple, inexpensive devices. It is just, I would say it's as essential a tool as a screwdriver inside of your tool bag. It's just absolutely, again, it's essential. I know I use that term a lot, so apologize for that. I did try to keep the technology low for those who are not have electric engineering backgrounds or technical backgrounds. I hope I achieved that. And again, thank you for the tons of comments from last week's video that said, please do a class on this. And I hope that this class served you well. And I know I covered a couple other devices other than this that are digital voltmeter in nature, one of those being the Kilowatt Meter, which is a very helpful device for being able to measure voltage and amperage and wattage. Just as important, I think, as using this as a troubleshooting device. That is a great unit to be able to look at consumption. And then I know I deviated over to looking at the Surge Guard, but again, that also has a digital voltmeter capability along with all the protection functions to keep your RV safe and protecting your appliances and really protecting your loved ones. It will do the things that if it sees something wrong with that plug, it will not give you power and will not make your camper unsafe. Thank you again. If you want to see any of these devices on where you can purchase them, again, you see them in my toolkit. I strongly recommend them for my use, and I hope that you see value in your use as well. I'll put those in the show notes here within the YouTube channel, or go out to ilovervlife.com and you can go to the RV accessories and you can see all the devices that are there, or you can just look at this specific blog with this video intact, and I will have all the things that I talked about today and where you can purchase those. Do I make a couple pennies off of them? I do, not much, but it helps me be able to provide bandwidth and keep up my camera gear to be able to support you. But there's a bigger reason why I do this, and you all know what it is. It's just really a simple thing. It's just because I love RV life.